welcome to Songkla Rajapat MOOC English for the Workplace program. I'm Stephen Judge, and this is the second video on presentations. Before we talked about the language and also how to organize a presentation, today I want to talk to you about how to give a successful presentation to make it look professional, smooth, and get the success that you want. Moving on to our next topic is stages of a good presentation. Now this section will help you with your planning, making, and editing any presentation that you're going to make and make it great or good. Before, in the previous video, we talked about the basic structure of introduction, body, and conclusion. This is going to be more of an advanced technique to make your presentations great, memorable, and successful. So I have an acronym to help you remember the message, and that's called BOMBER B. So BOMBER B stands for bang, opening, message, bridge, examples, recap, and bang again. So BOMBER B. And this will help you remember how to make your presentation interesting and exciting. So let's start off with bang. Bang is you want to start with something to get people's attention. And there's a couple of ways people can do this. You can do this with a reference to here and now, a funny joke or a quote or a story, a surprising fact, a question, audience participation, or a visual aid. Now, here's an example of an introduction, a beginning with a bang, and there's a couple of examples of bang in this one. So, well, good morning, everyone. I hope you all found somewhere to park your car this morning. They say the road work will be finished shortly, but they've been saying that for the past 6 months. Okay, today I'm going to talk about a new project to help you give up smoking. Did you know that every day 1,000 people die from smoking-related businesses? That's the same as 2 jumbo jet crashes every day. Now, I've color coded the bangs in this example. So a reference to here and now is red. Everyone probably had difficulty finding parking in the morning. So it's something that everyone had to deal with that morning before they went to the presentation. There's the funny joke at the beginning where it's saying, oh, they've been saying for a while that they'll be done the road work and they're still not done. So it's a little kind of joke. There's a surprising fact about the amount of people who die every year. So there's a couple of good bangs to get everybody's attention at the beginning of this presentation. So again, yeah, you want to do something to get people's attention before you get started. Next we have the O, opening. So in the opening, you want to say a few words about yourself. Tell the audience what you're going to talk about, and also explain to them how they will benefit. Why should they listen to you? What are they going to gain from your presentation? Because if they don't have a reason to, they're not going to pay attention. And if it's a sales, you want them to pay attention. So it's important. It's an important step in the process. So here's my example. You can read it on the right. And so I've just few words: my name, my position at the company. I have what they're going to, during my presentation, I'll be talking about, and then the languages or the vocabulary that we learned in the previous video: first, next, second. And then finally, we can offer, and that's how they'll be able to benefit from the program. So there's something that they need to learn during my presentation. Our next is the message. So this is the body of your presentation. They say, well, academics have studied for attention, for effectiveness. The most main points that you want to have in your presentation is 4. 3 is the most common, but if you try to do more than 4, people can't remember, forget, and lose interest when you do more. So 3 is the most common, but 4 is the maximum amount of main points you want to have in your presentation. Next is bridge. We talked about earlier about making things, making a presentation a conversation, not a lecture. So you want to bridge the information you're sharing to the audience. So you want to connect your audience's needs or interests with each point. And I've given examples here. So you'll save hours a week if you adapt this process. So you're telling them why it's important for them. So you want to bridge your information to the needs and wants. You want to show them how they will benefit from each main point during your presentation. Or you can ask them questions and really make it into a conversation. So, example, how many of your clients put this as their #1 priority? And you can ask someone directly, and they'll answer and they'll self-reflect and follow along. So this keeps their interest and also helps them reflect and digest what you're sharing, and keeps them on your side as you're giving your presentation. Next, we have E for examples. During your presentation, you want to give examples, graphs, charts. Scientific proof are great forms of examples. What's also a good form of examples are personal stories, whether they're yours or they're testimonials from like customers or people who have done a process or something, and you're sharing their story, are also really good for making points at the end. So you want to make a point and finish with an example and a bridge for each main point. Now, next is the R in bomber. The R at the end, and that's recap. So in your conclusion, you want to summarize your main points again at the end. You also want to mention the key benefits, remind them again. In presentations, repetition is key to memorization and remembering. Even saying something similar many times in slightly different ways help people remember without becoming bored. And also describe to your audience how they can apply the information about what you talked about. So you want them ready to act and do something. So these are all great ways of things to do in your conclusion. And finally, we have bang. So there's 2 bangs, one at the beginning, one on the end. You don't want to end just with a dull note. So there's ways you can do this. You can link back to your opening bang, so you can remind them about what you did in the beginning and kind of copy it, or point out, hey, do you remember? Or you can end up with a quote or a dramatic statement for them to think about and reflect upon as you finish. You can use an unusual visual aid to get them thinking, or a call and action. Okay, you need to call this number, or we need to do this if we want to be successful. These are all great final bangs that you want to end your presentation with to make sure it's memorable and effective. So again, you want to do Bomber B. Have a great beginning, a bang to catch everybody's attention, a good opening, introduce yourself, tell them what you're going to talk about and why they should listen. 4 or less main points. Bridge the ideas in yours to the needs and wants of your audience. Give them examples so they can follow along and relate. Just don't assume they're going to understand. In the conclusion, recap what you talked about and the benefits, and then end with a final bang to make sure that you and your message is memorable. We just talked about using Bomber B as things you want to think about, plan, and use during a good presentation. I want to double down on that idea of giving you a useful presentation checklist that will help you make sure that you know you are ready to give a great presentation. So first up in our presentation checklist is you need to think about the audience. So did you think about the expectations? Do you know what your audience wants? Do they want information? Do they want knowledge? Do they want a product? And are you giving information to them that shows that you've met their expectations? Is it there present in your presentation? What is the technical knowledge of your students or of your audience? What's the technical knowledge of your audience? Can you use fancy words, or do you have to keep your words simple so they understand? What's the size of your audience is also important. People act differently with a different amount of people in the room. Larger audiences, people tend to lose focus, where smaller audiences, people keep more eye contact. So the delivery might change depending on the size. So did you think about that? Did you think about questions or discussions that your audience may ask you during or after your presentation? You have to be pre-planned and think about things. So did you think about that and address any issues when you were making your presentation and preparing it? So before, make sure you checked that you thought about and planned and included all these things in your presentation. B is the content. Did you think about what to include in your presentation? You don't have to talk about everything during your presentation. So the length and depth of your presentation may change depending on the situation and the people you're talking to. Did you think about it? And finally, the number of key ideas during your presentation. How many are there? We talked about it before. 4 is the max, especially if they're shorter key points. Are you going to give 2 long key ideas, 3 medium, or 2 short? Have you thought about it before you give your presentation? Next, the structure. So when you were sequencing, we talked about this in language, the beginning, the middle, and the end, the introduction, body, and conclusion. Are they organized in the right order? Is the information there? We talked about repetition, the importance of repetition. There's 2 ways you can say exactly the same thing again and again, which can be boring. So sometimes you have to practice saying the same thing slightly a different way, using similar words with similar meanings. And we talked about that in the language video earlier. Next is think about your delivery, so your practice. So it's always good if you're going to do a presentation to film and review before you give a presentation. Did you think about, are you being formal or informal during your presentation? Who are you giving it to? Your audience determines whether to be formal or informal. Looking back on your presentation, your enthusiasm. Are you excited? Are you confident? If you're nervous, how much of it does it show? So people do like enthusiasm, but you can be too overly enthusiastic and maybe turn people off. So you have to play and practice with that before you actually give your real presentation. Do you use one speed during your presentation, or are you practicing slow and fast, emphasizing points with pauses? So is that happening during your video or presentation? Are you thinking about it actively when you're giving your presentation? Your body language during your presentation. Are you making eye contact? Are you using your hands and gestures? What's your posture? Are you hunched over, standing up straight, showing your confidence? These are all things to think about, practice, and rehearse before giving your real presentation. Your visual aids. What kind of visual aids are you using? What do they look like? Their meaning, we talked about how they mean 1,000 words. Make sure they mean exactly to you what they mean to the audience, that the meaning is the same. Sometimes things mean different to different people. Make sure there's no miscommunication. Ask for other people's opinions before you use them in a presentation. And make sure it's connected to your presentation. You're not just adding it in because it looks cool, that it has a connection to what you want to say and what you want to share. Next, we have practice. Use tape recorders, use videos. Next, practice before your presentation. Use a video recorder, use a tape recorder, use scripts to help you go along. Again, you don't want to read, but you want to maybe have reminders of what you're going to say to help you keep the flow going. And this is great to practice before you give your official presentation. Don't assume everything is just going to go smoothly. Next, check the room. We talked about that before. Check everything. So check the size of the room, the seating, your equipment, the sound, the lighting. Make sure it's all great and you're comfortable with everything. Because one little thing being different and you not being used to it might throw you off, and you might not give as great as a presentation as you want to give. So check everything before you go. And finally, your language. The language you use during your presentation. Is it simple and clear? Can everyone understand? Are your sentences short and simple and sweet? Are your structure signals signposts that we talked in the language, are you using them effectively? Are you using so, then, next, moving on, those type of words? Are they in your presentation to help your audience follow along? Now, if you follow this checklist before you give your presentation, if you said yes to all of these, you are going to give a good presentation. Thank you. My name's Stephen Judge. Now, if you can go on to the question portion for presentations, and I'll ask you about the vocabulary and the techniques used for giving a presentation. Good luck and see you in our next video. Bye-bye.